Hey everybody, I'm here today with composer Will Bates. You may know him from his work on The Voyeurs, Imperium, Dumb Money, and the about to be released Immaculate, which I got to see at South by Southwest this past weekend, or week, I guess. I'm used to the premiere weekend, but week, which was a cool experience. Uh, how you doing, Will?
I'm good. Yeah, really good. Good to see you.
So what have you the atmosphere with like the film festival, like something like South by Southwest, it's like how was that for you, like experiencing a film you worked on at like such a grand festival like South by? How cool was that?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, it's funny. One of the things that we have to do as composers is watch the movie over and over again, of course, right? Like
Yeah.
I get so familiar with it. I know the ins and out of it. And this one I've been involved since the very beginning, since the script stage. So really it's been in my life for a long time. And watching it with a crowd like that for the first time, it does feel a bit like watching it for the first time. Like I realize that there are moments that I haven't laughed at or jumped at in lit years, literally. And
Yeah.
it was like a rock concert that night. I mean, you were there. It was crazy. Like people were going nuts, and
Yeah, it was a vibrant atmosphere. Yeah,
it sure was. It really was. And South by Southwest is so special. Like I think Neon were really smart having it be the place where it's seen for the first time. It's just such a intersection of different cultural things, like having music there. And I realized that was my fifth time at South by, like a couple times with bands, a few times with movies. And I think that really says a lot. It kind of sets the festival apart as a very different kind of experience for experiencing film.
Yeah, no, it's my second time going, and I mean, it's even if the film, like in the case of Immaculate, like the film is so heightened by the atmosphere of like
Right.
that's going on in the film, so it's so great to have like a crowd like actively jumping and participating in the film without being in annoying in any way. It's just like
Totally.
everybody's there to celebrate the art that's on the screen, and it's such a cool experience.
Yeah. I think the thing that I walked away from with was just like a reminder that the movie is really fun. Like, we get so kind of focused on like various, the technicalities of it, especially in music. Like, am I being scary enough? Are we getting the right beauty here? And blah, blah, blah. But really, it's just like watching it in that room. It's like, yeah, this movie is so fun. It's like, that's it in the end. Like with a lot of horror,
Yeah.
I think that's a really important aspect that a lot of times gets kind of glossed over. So
Well, I imagine with because you've done a few horror throughout your career, it's like I must in my head I can imagine it's fun to do like a horror film because you're like heightening the scares and you're like making the atmosphere like stand out so much more. Um, what was when you were stepping into Immaculate? It's like from like a composer standpoint, was there anything that like inspired you to like make it the way that it turned out? Because I mean, it's incredibly effective throughout, like the way it plays out.
right on. Thank you. I mean the unusual thing about this process was that, like I said, being involved so early on, one of the first things I had to do was write this hymn that's in a pretty early scene. There's a group of nuns singing in this chapel, and they needed that piece of music to be written and recorded before so that they had it for production so that the nuns could be singing it. So that was like my first task, and I told Mohan like I think I'm gonna obviously it needs to be in Latin, and why don't we use the Te Deum text, which is like this sort of reverent prayer. And I wrote this piece using that text and like trying to kind of expand on my dodgy 15-year-old high school Latin. I had some help from a friend with the grammar. But yeah, like that was a really brilliant way of like starting this process. So we sort of started with the kind of more traditional sort of church-like Catholic iconographic sounds, and the idea was that it should be ecclesiastic and familiar, but there should be something slightly off about it. So that was like a perfect way to figure out where it should go from there. Like it's part of Cecilia's journey. Like it begins with this sort of feeling of awe and majesty and like benevolence almost, and then goes on from there to turn into what it obviously turns into, which is not particularly benevolent. Uh, so yeah, that was a great way to kind of figure out what the language of the score was going to be at the outset.
Yeah, when it came to like the score, the I mean, just from the jump of the film, you have such a, like the opening sequence that plays out, and I in no way want to give anything away because I highly recommend anybody that's watching to go watch the film, especially in a theater. Uh,
Yeah,
but the entire intro with the suspenseful nature of it, and then just how it plays out to the title card. I mean that whole sequence is so impactful because of the score, the sound design, and just Michael Mohan's direction.
right
It's
on.
and so it's just when you came on to the project, you mentioned at the script stages. Did you come on because of Michael originally?
I
Because you
did,
worked with him
yeah.
on Voyeurs, and
Exactly. Yeah, we had met a couple of years before with another Sydney Sweeney project, and I believe Sydney brought him on board to do Immaculate. Sydney obviously is a producer as well as the star. And he brought me on. And it was, we since the Voyeurs, we've become good friends. And, I have to say, it's lovely, of course, meeting new filmmakers and working with new people. But when you get to work with the same person again, and you have that kind of level of trust already, it really kind of kickstarts the process. It means that I can kind of relax a bit and like I can fall off the bike. You know what I mean? Like I can
yeah, you
make
get be
mistakes
in a
and not be
comfort
afraid.
zone. Yeah,
Yeah, so I feel like from the beginning I was able to really experiment and suggest things. And Michael is so open and so enthusiastic and encouraging, especially to experimentation. He really puts everyone he works with in a really safe place, and I think that's such a wonderful trait for a filmmaker. And that was certainly the case with this. We really, we started, I think at the beginning, we were like having lunch and he was like, he told me about the thing, and then he gave me the script and I read it and was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And then we started talking about score and he made a playlist and we started talking about other horror movies and other genres and stuff. And then once we started working, it's funny, he and I just talked about this the other day. He was like, all of those tracks I gave you, we just sort of threw them away, didn't we? And it's like, yeah, in the end, we just found a thing, I
yeah,
think. And that had a lot to do with that hymn. That was one thing. And the other thing that happened right at the beginning of production is there's another scene that you might remember when this isn't giving anything away. When Cecilia arrives at the convent, she gets out of the car and she's in that piazza at the convent. And there's a trio of nuns and they're playing music in the courtyard and they're
yeah,
sort of, I don't know if you
yeah. No, I remember that. Yes, yep.
so he was like, "What are they going to be playing? What do you think? I mean, we have to think about what instruments they should be. What do you think?" And I was like, "Well, what about like, I don't know, a zither, a psaltery, and a hurdy-gurdy?" He's like, "Great!" And he like sent someone out in Rome, and they went and bought those things. And then I was like, "Oh shit! I guess I have to buy them too." So I went and bought my own, and I started writing sketches using those instruments, and so that they had something to mime to and whatnot.
Yeah,
And then that was another way for us to sort of build on this. We had a palette, and sometimes with anything, I mean anything creative, but particularly music, it's always good to be able to talk about something rather than just talking about nothing for forever. Like I find that writing sketches right at the beginning is a really useful process so that we can kind of go through what's working, what's not working. This isn't what I imagined, but this is cool. And
yeah.
Mike was really responsive to that and was really good at kind of sort of isolating things that he liked and things that he didn't think we needed to move forward with. So it was a lovely exploring process that we went on together to find the tone.
So you were actively throughout the filming of the like movie, you were actively composing and coming up with how everything would sound throughout versus
Yeah, I mean certainly at the very beginning I was, yeah, like I found those instruments and then I started just sending him sketches and then of course that scene in the convent with the song with the hymn. And then of course as this process always goes, they finished production and then we kind of took a few months break as they finished the edit, and during the edit process he would ask me occasionally for what do you imagine would go here in this scene, and I would just write something and then he'd like disappear and use it for a couple of weeks and then come back and be like, that thing you wrote, we're using it in 15 places. I think you need to write more things like that. So, it was lovely, like a really organic way of developing the sound of the film. And then, once we got into actual post-production, we go right back to the beginning, and I feel like I sort of start again and I score it using all the things that we've learned in that process. So yeah, it
Oh,
was
that's like
really
a
fun.
fantastic to hear because in my head I've always felt like it was like when the production's over, then the composer comes in during post and kind of like, so it's cool to hear that you in particular like were there the entire process and composing as you went, and it's an outstanding job. It's just another reason why people should go see it in a theater. I don't know if it's going to be playing in like XD IMAXs, but if it is, they need to like have that
Yeah,
sound
that would be
all
fun.
around. So
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, I mean, it's unusual for a composer to have that experience. I've had it just a handful of times in my career, and I have to say, any time that opportunity has come up, it's always been very positive. And I hope that I get to do that more, like being involved that early.
yeah, no, I hope you do too because it definitely worked here, and I hope
Cool.
you and Michael get to continue working together because clearly
Yeah,
you
thank
both
you.
have such a good relationship when it comes to
Yeah,
making the movies.
we're a good
Uh,
team.
Oh, last final question for you. So one of my favorite films of last year, Dumb Money, you composed. When you went in to make Dumb Money, and then you were saying when we spoke the other day that that you had several projects happening at the same time, and you spoke briefly about it there. But I would like if you would expand on like how do you keep like those that stuff all like you have it all separate in your head, but also because I would imagine that would be so overwhelming to have so much going on. Like me, just as a film critic, like if I have multiple projects to write about, I stress. So I can't imagine like how like I mean maybe you're better at internalizing and organizing in your head, but I was just curious if you
Yeah,
would elaborate.
yeah, of course. I mean, I think I drive people around me crazy if I don't have more than one thing going on at once. That's the way of my personality. I grew up in a family of actors who were just constantly convinced that the phone would never ring again. So I've inherited that trait, which is mostly irrational, I think. But I like to have things that are happening simultaneously. I will say that what I don't like to have is that first that first moment of coming up with what I've always called the kind of eureka moment, where I have to, like, I read the script, I watch the scene, or whatever it is that's beginning the process. I have to have a moment behind the piano where I find the melody for a character, or the thought that I would have to do that multiple times in a day is not that's not realistic. Like,
Right.
I have to be sort of working within the world of Sister Cecilia, for example, like for a good, really focused amount of time. When it comes into the sort of nitty-gritty of scoring a movie, there's a lot of like back and forth, and especially with a movie like Dumb Money that had long sequences that were intricately edited, and there was a lot of like really technical detail that needed to happen with that. That was kind of that those tasks are kind of easier to coexist with other projects. And like with that movie, like Roaring Kitty, I got to find his theme,
Yeah.
and unfortunately with that one found it very quickly, and Craig loved it, which was great. And then we used that as our way to kind of move forward. But I'm also fortunate. This is my home studio right now, but I have a studio in North Hollywood, and I have enough space where I can kind of have a rig for each thing. I think when we were talking the other night, I was telling you that there was a moment, it was probably only a few days, but Immaculate, Dumb Money, and a documentary that I was scoring about Anita Pallenberg were all happening at the same time. Anita was just beginning. Dumb Money I was just in my very last round of revisions, and I think I was dealing with some vocals for Immaculate. And fortunately, the instrumentation of those three projects was so different that I was able to be like, there's my Immaculate kind of weird ancient instrument rig. Here's my kind of tech horns and my synths for Dumb Money, and here are my guitars for Anita, which is like a Rolling Stones documentary. So sometimes it works out really nicely, and you can weirdly be inspired by each one. And I think that the work would have been different. I think all three projects went outstandingly well, and somehow subconsciously they must have all influenced one another. I couldn't tell you how exactly, but I see that as nothing but positive. Like I've always been quite good at multitasking anyway, but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
No, I mean, yeah, this you describing it just seems like you have a lot more capability of organizing than I do. So,
I mean,
but
it's you know, music. You
yeah.
if I showed you a mess of cables, you would not probably think it was that organized, but you know, everything else is.
But thanks so much, Will, for talking to me for this little bit of time. I really do
Yeah,
appreciate you stopping by.
of
So
course. Nice. Thanks for having me.
so everybody make sure to check out on the 22nd, I believe. It comes out in theaters nationwide and I think worldwide. So make sure to check it out. Neon is releasing it, and it should be anywhere around you if you want a really good, thrilling, scary, good time. But definitely, if you're a little scared of nuns, I mean, this one's probably not gonna do you
Probably
any
not for you.
favors. But all right.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Con.